welcome to this episode of the Image Austenite. I'm Frances Duncan, author, Austenite, life coach. My very special guest is best-selling award-winning author Vanessa Kelly. She writes historical mystery and historical romance, also has the academics to back it up with an MA in English Lit, and she studied towards a PhD in women authors of the 18th century. We are here today to talk about her upcoming novel, Murder at Donwell Abbey. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome.
This book comes out on the 25th of November. It's Murder at Donwell Abbey. It is Emma, now Knightley, solving a murder at Donwell Abbey, and it's actually the second in the series. The first is Murder at Highbury, in which you kill Mrs. Elton. I bet you loved doing that.
It was actually a lot of fun, and I don't even remember at what point in the pre-discussion with my editor and my agent when I decided to do that. I was planning the book out and thinking, of course, you have to start with who are you going to murder and how is that going to disrupt life in the village. And Highbury, as you know, is a very tight community, a small village. I think they probably haven't seen a murder in a very long time. I wanted someone whose murder would be very disruptive, but would also generate a lot of suspects. Who better than Mrs. Elton? Miss Bates is probably the only person who genuinely likes her. My agent thought, well, maybe you should have a party scene where, they're all together and you can see everybody in Highbury and you can introduce all the suspects. And I thought, no. Everybody knows who Mrs. Elton is. If they haven't read Emma, most of them have seen the miniseries or one of the movies. Let's just get right to it. Let's just knock her off. That scene was so much fun to write, I have to say.
Dream fulfillment for most readers.
Yes. Although there was one reader who did comment early on that she wished I hadn't killed Mrs. Elton. She would have loved to have seen Mrs. Elton clashing with Emma and getting up into Emma's business constantly. And I just thought, what a terrible thing to do to your heroine. I'm not going to do that to Emma. She's already had to put up with her for the last year. I'm not going to make her put up with her anymore.
If Mrs. Elton were trying to solve the murder also, maybe, but I couldn't see her doing that. I could see her panicking and wanting to leave Highbury.
Good point. She'd be off to Maple Grove in an instant.
The reviewer at the Criminal Element hoped for many more mysteries for Emma and her loved ones to solve together in the future, and you have delivered with Murder at Donwell Abbey.
That was a fun book to write too, because I got to do a winter setting. I don't think I'm giving anything away because it's in the first chapter, which is on my website, but Emma's father, Mr. Woodhouse, asking Miss Bates to marry him.
So funny.
That's what I thought. I mean, maybe it's a little controversial, but I just thought it was hilarious and sweet. I wanted them to have a bit of a happy ending and to grow a bit, and then to set the murder in the middle of their betrothal party was a lot of fun too. I mean, not that murder is fun. We know that. It was fun to write a mystery where the murder occurs at a party because, again, most of Highbury is at the party because there have been all these gate crashers too. And so you have dozens of potential suspects. As an author, it gave me a lot of opportunity to explore various avenues, throw up red herrings, and still have the silliness of Miss Bates and Mr. Woodhouse getting married.
I haven't actually read the first book, and I didn't need to be able to get into the second one.
That's always a goal with any series. I think it's hard to do, but it's always been a goal for me to write every book as much of part of the series, obviously, in that series world, but to be as much of a standalone as possible because readers don't always come to a series by way of the first book. I often don't. As a reader, I'll see a book that's just come out and I'll think, oh, that looks great, and I buy it, and then I realize it's the fifth in the series, and you know what, that's fine. That's often the way I get into a series. So I do make a point of trying to make each book a standalone in that respect.
Going straight into Miss Bates and Mr. Woodhouse being engaged, so funny. I had no idea that was coming.
I think some people who read the first book kind of guessed that it was leading in that direction. But what I also wanted to do was make Emma completely oblivious to it.
Perfect.
Emma can be very oblivious about these things. So George had kind of started to figure it out. He'd been reading the signs in the first book, but of course Emma, it's just too horrible for her to even contemplate having Miss Bates as a stepmother. It's fun to develop that relationship through the book too.
Especially considering how Emma treats Miss Bates during the course of Emma.
Yes.
This woman's going to be your mum now. Very awkward.
Mm-hmm. Lots of feelings coming up there.
This is a huge change from your previous works. You've written some very sexy books.
Yes, I have.
What was it like changing from that to this Austen, which you could have put the sex in and you chose not to?
There were a couple reasons for that. My first book was published in 2009, and it was a Regency set historical romance, and it was very sexy. That was the types of books, the kind of Regency set romances at that time were pretty sexy. I mean, now I think there are more subcategories. There's Regency erotica, and there's closed door, and there's more room than there was back when I was starting to write. They were generally pretty sexy books. That's what I was reading at the time too. I loved Christina Dodd and Eloisa James and Teresa Madeira, Lisa Kleypas. They were writing these wonderful books, and I wanted to write a book like that. But what's interesting is that all of my historical romances from the very beginning always contained a mystery element. I'm a very plot-focused person. Now, obviously, with a romance, you have to really focus on the emotional story between the lead characters. That's really what drives the book, is the development of their relationship, how they overcome obstacles, how they connect physically, emotionally. But for me, I have to have a plot that drives the action. Characters react to events. That's how they grow. Events change them, and events illuminate them because they react to a certain event in a certain way. But as somebody who's always been plot-driven, and I like to read books with good, strong plots, I found mystery to be the easiest way for me to develop a plot for my characters to react, to respond, and to grow with. Some of the books are very light in terms of plot, and some of them were really full-on mysteries to the point where some reviewers would say this is really more of a mystery, and some readers would actually complain because they felt it was too mystery-focused. My books were always on the long side, and that's because I would have these big mystery plots. I had to pay more attention to the plots when I started writing murder mysteries. With the romances, sometimes the plots were just occasionally a bit incidental, like there'd be a little bit of a plot hole, but it didn't really matter because that wasn't the focus. I could dance over a plot hole, or if it was a little thin, it wasn't going to be something a reader is going to trip over because they're engaged in the emotional story.
And they're just waiting for the next sex scene.
This is really interesting too in terms of the sex scene. When I started out writing, they were really sexy. They were very spicy. And they kind of went up and up and up and up, and they peaked. And then at a certain point, and I don't know if it had to do with the fact that I was getting older or that I just couldn't think of things to say anymore, the mystery components started to come to the fore. My sex scenes started to get lighter and sparser. I mean, they still had open door sex in them and a lot of the development of the relationship between characters, the hero and the heroine, but I started to move into the point where I was more interested in how the hero and heroine fell in love, solving the mystery or going on the adventure together. By the time I got to writing my last contract, which were my Highlander novels, I always had a lot of humor in my books, and I always loved writing about families. A lot of my romances, the last 3 series, are all interconnected, all about this huge extended family. So I always liked writing about families and children, grandparents, and throwing them all in the mix of this adventure or mystery. By the time I got to the last series, I was getting ready for a change. I was also writing romances with my husband. I love having romantic elements in my mystery. I love that I have George and Emma. But by the time I was getting to the end of my last romance contract, I really was looking for something different. And I said to my agent at the time, I'm either going to retire or I'm going to write historical mystery.
I'm so glad you didn't retire.
Thank you.
It really sounds like a natural progression for you.
Yes, it was a natural progression. I think I'd done everything and said everything I'd wanted to do in historical romance. My husband had stopped writing at a certain point. We wrote contemporary romance together, which most of those books also had a mystery element to them. So he'd stopped writing. He reached the point where he said, I'm done. I'm done writing. I had too much going on, and it was getting pretty stressful, actually, because I was writing 2 to 3 books a year and a novella, and it was starting to get overwhelming. One of the things I really enjoy about writing a mystery is it's kind of a slower process. You really have to think through your plots. You can't dance over those plot holes with a mystery, or your readers are going to catch you on it. It enabled me to slow down. I write 1 book a year right now. I could really delve into constructing plots and building a world in a way that does feel really satisfying. I mean, I loved writing my romances, but that chapter of my life just kind of came to a natural end.
I was going to ask which is more fun for you, murder or sex, but it sounds like it's murder.
It is murder. It was sex in the beginning, probably, and the emotional relationship, but now it's the murder.
To be fair, I think that happens to most women of a certain age. We're more interested in murder.
Of people who are sometimes in our lives, I'm sorry to say. Shockingly.
You put them in your characters, do you?
Yes, I do. I do.
Speaking of characters, Cyree James is quoted on Murder at Donwell Abbey saying that your depictions of Jane Austen's characters are spot on. Are there any other Austen characters that you're interested in exploring?
I'm approaching it from 2 angles. Like an inner circle of characterization would be the existing characters in Emma, the villagers, secondary characters, the Coles, Mrs. Goddard, the school teacher, some characters like Mr. Martin, or people who are even just named, like Farmer Mitchell, who don't even appear in the book but are named or have small roles in the book. And even Mr. Woodhouse. I thought, I want to develop these characters more. I want to give these secondary characters a bigger role in the books and explore Emma's world through her relationship with these other characters from Highbury. And then I did always intend to have characters from some of the other novels intersect with Emma. I'm almost finished the first draft of my 3rd book, which is called Murder at Enscombe Park.
Ooh, that name's familiar.
Yes, we're moving out of Highbury because you begin to run into that Murder, She Wrote thing. I can't keep having people drop dead in Highbury.
There'll be no one left.
I have to space them a couple years apart at least. Frank Churchill marries Jane and they go live with his uncle at Enscombe Park in Yorkshire. These families are interconnected now. Miss Bates and Mr. Woodhouse will be married, so she's now Mrs. Woodhouse. They're going to go on their first, it's really Emma's first big trip. The new Mrs. Woodhouse is going to see Jane, which means Mr. Woodhouse is coming along. So that's where a lot of the comic element is going to come in that book, is Mr. Woodhouse is going to make his first trip out of Highbury.
He's leaving Highbury.
He's leaving Highbury, and it's a complete dog and pony show, as you can imagine. Damp sheets, bad food it's just a nightmare.
He didn't learn from Selena.
He did not.
You take your own sheets. Mrs. Elton could have told him.
He wasn't listening. So that was an issue. You're right. They should have brought their own sheets. Emma thought she'd thought of everything. She forgot the sheets. It's a miracle they didn't all die of a contagion. I didn't really plan this. There are people from another book, Pride and Prejudice, who are also from Yorkshire, and it's the Hurst family. So Mr. and Mrs. Hurst and Caroline Bingley are making an appearance in my third book.
Oh, that's so funny. The actress who played Mrs. Hurst in the 95 Pride and Prejudice was Mrs. Elton in the 96 Emma.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Carolyn, of course, she's trying to take over every scene she's in, so I have to keep her on a tight leash. But I just thought, wouldn't it be hilarious if the Churchills actually knew the Hursts? They're both kind of from the same social sphere. They both have estates in Yorkshire. It turns out that the Hursts and Carolyn have a couple weeks to kill before they can head off to Pemberley for their yearly visit. So they're going to just drop in at Enscombe Park. And Emma's going to be thinking, who are these Darcys they keep talking about? This is so annoying.
This sounds even better than the last one. I'm so excited.
It's been giving me a lot of opportunities for fun. You know, I don't want to go too overboard with piling everybody in at once. And also I have to always think about who Emma is going to interact with and how she's going to interact. With other Austen heroines, Emma would clash a little bit with them. Like, I would think that Elizabeth and Emma, if they were trying to solve a murder together, might get in each other's way or get up in each other's gears. Whereas Catherine Morland and Emma would make a great team.
Catherine would be a little bit bumbling.
Yes. And she'd allow herself to be led a bit. I think it would be fun to expand Emma's world. That's kind of my long-term goal. Maybe she'll want to go to Bath. Maybe Mr. Woodhouse can be talked into going to Bath to take the waters. The thing is Emma's pretty good at it, and maybe she just starts sticking her nose where it doesn't really belong because murder just happens to happen in Bath.
Maybe they could run into the Thorpes. Lots of people want to kill them too. So many suspects.
Oh my gosh. John Thorpe.
That's who I was thinking of.
Maybe the world just needs to be rid of John Thorpe, eh?
I run the local Jane Austen Society. We had a speaker talk about whether Frank Churchill killed his aunt. What are your thoughts on that? I was very interested since you were going to Enscombe in the next book.
It's so interesting that you brought this up. I came across an article about that. I became fascinated by it, and I started Googling articles about Frank potentially murdering his aunt, which does happen at an astonishingly convenient point in the book. One author said that what was one of the interesting things that Jane Austen does, she glosses over what Mrs. Churchill died of, but she makes a point of saying it was not what she was suffering from all those years. It was something quite unexpected. It really stuck with me because the more you think about it, the more you realize, too, what a jerk Frank is in so many ways. I don't like Frank nearly as much as I used to, and especially since I've now done deeper reads of Emma. I was thinking of Frank from the Gwyneth Paltrow movie, especially. He's very charming with his fluffy hair, and he's very light. You don't really see him in a villainous light, but in other adaptations, and then when you read the book, you think, this guy is such an operator, and he's such a manipulator. And really, what he does to Jane, he drives the poor girl into clearly some kind of profound depression to the point where it starts to affect her physical health. He is not the person I think I was culturally conditioned to think, oh, Frank. He's not who Mrs. Weston thinks he is. I'm coming around to that point of view. I'm taking more Emma's initial reaction when she finds out, which is that she's really mad and thinks this is not a good person. And we already know what Mr. Knightley thinks of him. That's something I've been pondering as I'm writing this third book. I think that's a really interesting question, and I wish more people would write articles about it. Not that Austen gives us a lot to go on. She was pretty closed-mouthed for a reason, and I think she intentionally put something in there. That's my take on it anyway.
It's one of the things that I love about Austen. Each rereading, you find new things, and as you change, you view things differently. And you can interpret things that happen off page because Austen does such full characters. You can imagine the way that they would behave.
Yes.
And obviously, that's given you great models to work with in these novels.
Absolutely. I think I've read the book 4 times now, and every time I go back to it, I see something different.
I find it's difficult to answer when people ask which is your favourite novel, and often it's the one you've read most recently.
A couple months ago, I reread Persuasion, which I hadn't read in years, and I felt transported into another world the whole time I was reading it. It's just such a marvelous, deep novel. You know, I always thought Emma was my favorite, and after reading Persuasion, I had to think, maybe it's Persuasion. It's just so rich, and Anne is just such a profound character, and it's just such a tender, heart-wrenching story. It's just so beautiful.
Speaking about favourites, is Austen your favourite author?
She is. Austen actually is my favorite author, yes. When I started working on the series, and the first thing I did, of course, was reread Emma again. And I just thought, this is the most fantastic book, and she's just the most accomplished writer with just such a deep understanding of human psychology, while also being hilarious. Too many people who just won't read Austen, oh, it's too hard, whatever. I mean, they're missing out on so many levels, but they're also missing out on these deeply funny novels. I'd just forgotten how funny Emma is. The character, she is a funny person, and she's unintentionally a funny person. Then when I started to write the first book, I thought, I really, really hope I can bring some of that humor into it. It's frustrating to me that men in particular just don't want to read her because they have, but it's not just men. It was interesting that when I've done some live events at book clubs or at bookstores, people have asked me, do I need to have read Austen or do I need to read Emma to read this book? And of course I say, no, you don't. I write it as a standalone, and I give enough background, I think, that you can pick up the threads. But a lot of times people have said to me after they read the book, oh, now I want to go read Emma, which is like, yes, that's really what I want, is for people to go and read Austen. And I'm always saddened by how intimidated people are by Austen.
I agree with you that some people are intimidated to approach Austen and that they don't need to have read Austen to enjoy your novels, but I love that that's then turning them towards Austen because they'll get this depth when they look back at your novel. The recharacterization of Austen as a romance novelist, that turns some people off, but we know that the romance is very secondary to everything else.
Yes. You don't even get a kiss at the end. I've read some pretty funny takes on it where you get to the end of the novel and it's like wedding goodbye. She's wrapped that up. Of course, it's a key element of the books and a primary occupation for women at the time. But you're right. They're not romances. They're social comedies, basically. If you're going to even try to slot her into one genre.
I recently saw Lady Windermere's Fan. I think Jane Austen and Oscar Wilde, similar genre, it's social commentary, social comedy. They would have had a great time had they lived at the same time and possibly could have had a lavender marriage where they both got to write.
It would have been amazing. Can you imagine?
The things they would have come up with together.
They sure would have laughed a lot.
And Jane Austen does love to laugh.
Yeah, she does.
Anyway, I've wandered quite off topic. Thank you for indulging me. So, your fantastic novel comes out in just a couple of days. It is called Murder at Donwell Abbey, and it features Emma Woodhouse solving a murder and Miss Bates and Mr. Woodhouse getting engaged.
That's right. And one of the other things I like about it is that Miss Bates really becomes Emma's sidekick in this novel, which was not something I had anticipated either. And I thought, oh, what the heck, let's just go for it. Because I wanted to develop their relationship too. So I had a lot of fun with that.
I enjoyed that relationship. You really got to see Emma actually start to consider Miss Bates, and when this person's going to be your new stepmother and managing your father for you, you need to have a good relationship.
Girl, you got to get with the program.
Thank you so much for coming on our podcast to tell us about your upcoming book.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was really so fun and so relaxing, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Frances.
If you would like to find out more about Vanessa, you can find her at vanessakellyauthor.com.
Correct. Everything is there that you need.
That is my interview with the lovely author Vanessa Kelly. I've been Frances Duncan, and this has been Vanessa Kelly.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and we wish you happy reading.